Welcome to another episode of Software Explorations, Concept and Overviews, hosted by your shooty tech coach, Ralph, where we're engineering to win. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the sprint planning ceremony, how the Scrum team gets together and how they plan their next sprint, how they're going to execute it. So that's the plan for today. But before going any further, do me a big favor. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know every time we go live and drop new content, as well as go over to techcoachralph.dev to see all of the exclusive content that we have over there, from our sprint reviews to how to set up your resume to how to prep for job searches and interviews. And you can also have the opportunity to work with me one-on-one. You can sign up for free today and then we can go from there, right? With that being said, let's jump into our presentation for today. All right, so our topic, like I said, sprint planning, turning vision into action, crafting a roadmap for sprint success. So our agenda for today, we're going to be going over what is a sprint planning, what's the purpose of it, who participates in the sprint planning, what happens during the planning, the key activities that we go through, what are the results that we expect to have from the sprint planning, some of the best practices, some of the challenges that we face during sprint planning, and what's the role of a Scrum Master, and then we're going to wrap it up with our conclusion. All right, so let's get started. So what is a sprint planning? By definition, it's a ceremony where the Scrum team plans the work for the upcoming sprint. And we've spoken about this before. Sprints, they can be 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. Typically, most sprints are about 2 weeks. So we're going to be discussing and planning what it is that we're going to be working for the next 2 weeks. We'll go with 2 weeks for this presentation, all right? What's the importance of it? It ensures that everyone is aligned on the sprint goals and tasks. We're a team, so we all have to be on the same page, knowing, working towards the same direction. So that's the purpose, that we meet before we actually get the sprint started, so that we can work together in tandem. So the purpose of a planning, it helps the team define a realistic sprint goal. It allows the team to identify, estimate, and assign work items, user stories, and it creates accountability and collaboration within the team. So for the part where it helps the team define a realistic goal, when we do our sprint planning, we start off with setting a sprint goal based on what our quarterly commitments are. What is going to be the best goal for this sprint to add value to our stakeholders so that we can continue working towards our commitments. And it allows the team to say, all right, based on which we'll talk about this in a little bit, but based on the velocity and the capacity of what we can take on, the number of stories we can take on for this sprint, here is what these amount of stories that we think we can take. So that's what we're going to be looking for during the planning, and it creates the accountability and the collaboration within the team so that we all know, all right, the QA people have to do this, the software engineers have to do that, the product owner needs to do this, the Scrum Master needs to do this, and are there any third-party teams that we need to involve so that we can work together to have a smooth sprint. So who participates in the sprint planning, right? So we have the Scrum Master, of course. The Scrum Master facilitates the meeting and keeps the team on track. So they get the meeting started. They're making sure that we're moving along. If we start to veer off, or if we start to spend too much time on something that's not adding value to the planning or that can be discussed during the sprint, they get us back on track. The product owner prioritizes the backlog and provides clarity on user stories. So and this can work in different ways, but usually it's the product owner who is responsible for the backlog, coming up with the initial story and then discussing it with the team. And then we provide points, which I should be releasing. If it's not released already, I should be releasing in the Patreon a breakdown of how story pointing works that I did with the Tech Barbarians last year. I never released it. I'm going to be releasing it either this week or very, very soon, or it's already released. So you should definitely check out techcoachralph.dev for that. All right. But we have the backlog where the team is going to be pointing it. So the product owner is prioritizing what's the next thing that we need to do, and they're providing clarity on the story. The development team commits to the task they will complete based on the story points that we've allotted for the sprint that the Scrum Master helps figure out. And then the stakeholders, it says they're optional. I've never really seen a stakeholder join a sprint planning, but they're able to if they wanted to, but I've never seen that happen. They can provide input, but are typically not part of planning. All right, like I said, usually you get the stakeholder input during the sprint review where they're giving feedback, and then the product owner documents that and creates the necessary stories that's related to that. So what's needed during the planning, right? So we have the product backlog, a prioritized list of user stories or tasks. So what's the most important, so what's the least important that we need to work on, and sometimes you can even include what's urgent as well, because sometimes another team really needs us to do something. So that might get into if there's a defect that needs to be fixed, that might make it into the backlog for the that we need to prioritize for the upcoming sprint. Team velocity, a measure of how much work the team can handle. So the way we can probably create a video just on this itself on how velocity is calculated, but to make it simple, it looks back at the previous few sprints and see how many stories that we committed to, how many that we actually got completed. So sometimes you might commit to, let's say, 30 story points, but you completed like 20, and then another sprint you might commit to 30 again, and you complete 40. So it's getting that average from the past few sprints. It's okay, based on the availability for the team this coming sprint and what we've done in the past sprints, we should estimate that we should be able to take on about 25 story points, right? So then we pick stories that equals about 25 story points more or less based on what's available. And that's how we know how many stories we're going to be bringing in, right? Based on the team's velocity. And then we look at the sprint goal, and the sprint goal that we set is a clear objective to guide the sprint. So it should be a one sentence statement that's going to say, going into the sprint, this is what we expect to deliver from the sprint, right? Simple as that. So an example is, we expect to have a microservice for the API created. That could be a sprint goal, for example, right? And then there's a definition of done, the criteria that user stories must meet. Typically, there's a general definition of done that stories must be tested this way. They must have unit tests. They must be deployed in order to be considered done before we can move that to the done column. So that's what we're going to be discussing during the sprint planning. So what exactly happens at the sprint planning, right? So the Scrum Master reviews the metrics and sets the velocity for a new sprint. And sometimes you can even have like different members of the team, such as QA, who's saying, okay, we have this many open defects, we have this many customer reported defects, so that the team can say, okay, maybe we need to prioritize getting some of these defects or tech debts completed as part of a sprint. Then we have reviewing of the product backlog. The product owner presents the most important user stories based on how the team works. Sometimes it can be like the senior engineers or the lead engineers that present that, but it's usually the product owner who's saying, okay, this is the thing that we need to deliver on next, that we need to prioritize, and then when we take it from there. So then we define the sprint goal. The team agrees on a clear, concise objective. Sometimes different people will spit out some different sprint goals, and then we vote on or we modify one that we like the best to be very clear and concise, so that when we share with the stakeholders, this is what we're looking to complete in this next sprint, it's very easy to understand, and we can go from there. And then selecting the user stories, the team pulls in stories from the backlog based on priority and capacity. So like I said, if we can take on 25 points, we're going to look for the top priority tickets that equal up to 25 points. And sometimes those top priority tickets can be those top priority stories can be defects, bugs, or tech debt as well, as long as we are working towards the sprint goal that we've committed to. And then task breakdown stories are broken into smaller manageable tasks. In the past, I haven't seen companies do this, but at my current company, we definitely do this as a team, where we go through all the stories that we've committed to for this upcoming sprint, and then we say, all right, here are the subtasks that are going to be needed. So maybe you need to create a database, maybe you need to we need to create a test plan, and we break it down, all the little tasks that need to be completed to accomplish a successful story being closed out. So definitely I think that's very, very important and helpful to have that task breakdown, because doing it as a team, everyone knows what's involved, and that there's no confusion. So what are the results of sprint planning? We have the sprint backlog. We have a list of tasks the team commits to for the sprint, and that's going to be in that backlog. You're gonna have a section that says sprint, and I can actually show it to you after we are done with the presentation. I will show you example of one of the backlogs that I use for the Tech Barbarians, where it'll have what's actually in the current sprint, and then it'll have what is in the upcoming things that haven't been assigned to a sprint yet. So you have a list of tasks for the team to commit to for the sprint, and then you have a clear sprint goal where that the title of that sprint is going to be it's going to be right there, like this is what we're looking to accomplish. We'll have the task assignments, who is responsible for each task. One thing that that we personally like to do, we don't like to assign tasks before we start working on the story, because it's open to anybody to be able to work on these stories or on these tasks. So if we assign it, then someone might be reluctant to pull it in, but we take it. I like, and the way I coach my tech barbarians is on a pull basis instead of as a push basis, where before we even start on to just assign everything. No, I'd rather like, okay, next one up, first come first serve. If you have opening and capacity, then you need to take on the task, and that way we keep things moving, keep things flowing. All right. I do not like people sitting around waiting for someone to give them something to do. No, find something to do that's available. And then team buy-in, consensus and commitment from the entire team. And one thing that we normally do is we vote on a scale of 1 to 5 how likely we are to be able to meet our commitment. And then we'll say if there's people who are, even if there are people who are 5, we still look at for what are the risks and mitigations, like what can be a potential risk. Oh, we're not sure about this. We might need a dependency from somebody over here, and how can we mitigate? Oh, we can reach out to them early. Oh, we can go and do this research early so that we can, or maybe somebody's going to be out of town. We can work on that portion of this that we're relying on this person to do. We can work on that early. So that's how that team buy-in comes in, where we are all in agreement on the direction that we need to go on. So what are some best practices for the sprint planning? All right, prepare ahead of time. The product owner should have a refined backlog. So one of the worst things that you can do is you go into a sprint planning and there are not details on the story. There's no acceptance criteria. There's no definition of done, but it's a very, very high priority that we have to pull in, although nobody knows anything. We don't even know how to point it. And it's probably not even pointed as well, right? So like going into the sprint planning, we need to have all those details ahead of time, and it's just a bad look on the team and on the product owner if we haven't discussed this already. This should already be taken care of in the sprint, in story refinement, which we'll have a video probably next week on that, on what the story refinement is, how we go through it, and how we ask questions about the stories and how we add points to those stories. All right. And then staying focused, avoid going into technical details during a planning. That is one of my biggest pet peeves when we're in planning and then we start veering off into implementation details, technical details, all these little details on how we're going to actually build it when we should be building it during the sprint. We need to know the outcome that we want. And if we have to go into those technical details, then there probably should be a spike to do that investigation. A spike is a kind of like a research story where we're doing investigation on the upcoming work that we're going to need to do. Not all stories needed, but if we find ourselves spending a lot of time in a sprint planning or in a story refinement, trying to get into the technical details and the implementation details, then we probably need to say, all right, we need a spike, right? And that's probably going to be a challenge that we need, and that's the way to address it. Use time boxing, keep the meeting to a set time frame. For example, 2 hours for a 2-week sprint. One of the things that it's very important that we need to and even on the live streams, I set a time box so that we can say, all right, we want to keep the sprint under 2 hours. Sometimes we go a little bit over, but that's because we're having fun on the live streams. But in a work environment, we need to use time boxing so that, let's say, for the setting up the sprint goal, one of the things that we always end up doing is spending a lot of time on the sprint goal, trying to get the perfect wording, where it would be like, maybe we should limit this to 10 minutes trying to figure out the sprint goal. And after 10 minutes, we vote on the best one and then we keep moving because what happens is when these meetings start to drag on and on and on, people don't want to be there anymore. They start getting disinterested. They start working on other work that's important. And I think it's very, very important that we actually set a schedule and we stick to that schedule. And then collaboration and transparency, encourage input from all team members. And one thing that we do, my team does, is we have different people lead the sprint. So the sprint planning. So for instance, we'll say, all right, let's randomly pick somebody, and now they're going to be going through the board, saying, all right, these are the stories that we can pull in. Let's create the subtask, and they're documenting the risks and the mitigations, and just having everybody engaged. asking for input from everybody to see what it is that they think. Are we going in the right direction? Any concerns? I think one of the most important things is getting buy-in and getting input from the entire team. Scrum would not be what it is without that teamwork and that collaboration and that transparency, and not being afraid to air your thoughts and concerns that you may have. So what are some common challenges? And I think this the first one is the biggest common challenge. It's overcommitting, planning too much work for the sprint. I think one of the things that needs to happen more is people need to trust and listen to their Scrum Master more, and not have a idea in their head of what they think that they can do. Because sometimes, like, the Scrum Master, okay, based on this, the commitment that we should do is about 15 story points, right? But 15 story points might average up to like 3 stories, and now we're like, well, I think we can do these 2 other stories, and then now you end up committing 25, but then you end up committing 10 or completing 10 points, right? So now that's just it just looks so bad. It looks so bad on the team. And I think that not to overcommit, to me, it's a little better to pull in more work and then estimate up the following sprint, and instead of pulling in too much work and then failing miserably, and now you look terrible, and now you have to try to figure out why. In retrospect, you're like, everybody's discouraged because they missed out. They committed more than they should have, and now they completed less because you're trying to get everything done, when you probably should have went with what the Scrum Master said, which was, hey, we should do 15. And if you have to commit 14 or 16, based on what the most important, you do what you got to do, but you're not just going crazy with it. All right. And then we have poorly defined user stories. Lack of clarity leads to confusion during development, and that's why it's important to have those story refinements, which we're going to talk about most likely next week, so that you can have clear stories where it's easy to understand. Like, anybody who reads it, there's no doubt in their mind, and you can have those discussions and conversations, so that once we actually start, we know exactly what we're doing, and we're not during development like we're running with chickens, like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to figure out what's going on. And then lastly, external dependencies. External blockers that might disrupt progress, and that's something that we talk about during the risks and the mitigations. If you're relying on another team, if you're relying on maybe the DevOps team spinning up some infrastructure for you, maybe you were planning on doing something. I can't even imagine. I can't even describe how many times that we were like, okay, this is what we need to do, and then once we actually start doing it, oh, actually we don't have permission to this area, or we need to ask this other team to open up this port for us. Who knows? Like, so many different things, and it's like sometimes that's why it's important to do those spikes, so that you can actually figure out what are these external dependencies and how to work around them if they were to come up. All right. So what about the Scrum Master? One of my favorite people on the team are the Scrum Masters. What is their role in sprint planning, right? So it's ensure the team follows the process, because a lot of times, us engineers, we just like to veer off, and, maybe it's better to do it this way. And then now we end up down this whole rabbit hole. It's like, you click on this post on Twitter, and all of a sudden you end up on the other side of the world trying to figure out, why did the lion not stomp the rat? Who knows why the lion didn't do that? Somehow they ended up becoming best friends. Who knows where you end up, right? So they ensure the team follows the process. Like, as we start to veer off track, like we like to do, a lot of us have ADHD, and they just reel us back in. They're herding cats. I've heard it say Scrum Masters are herding cats. So they reel us back in to make sure that we're on track, we're staying focused, and we're working towards setting the next sprint and the next sprint goal. They remove obstacles to productive discussion. So if the Scrum Master sees like someone wants to say something but they look nervous, they'll start the conversation and say, hey, what do you think about this so and so? And maybe that opens them up to being able to speak. And also looking for what kind of obstacles can come. Like we were saying, like those third party obstacles, they might go out there and start to advocate for us to remove those obstacles, remove those blockers. And that's also one of the things that's important with the daily Scrum meeting, where the Scrum Masters are listening for what obstacles we face, so that they can go and remove those roadblocks, remove those barriers, right? And lastly, they help the team stay on track and avoid scopes creep. And they do that during the planning as well as during the entire sprint cycle, because a lot of times what if we add this to the story? It's like, well, what about if the Scrum Master look at you, well, what about if you just create another story? Because that wasn't pointed and that wasn't allocated when we were pulling these stories into the sprint. And that can actually blow up our sprint. So if you think that's a great idea, What about you create a story, you speak about it with a team, you point it, and they're also looking for, well, this story seems pretty big, like a 34-point story. Good Lord, that's a lot of points. What about if are we able to break this down into like 3 stories, maybe a 5-point and 8-point, another 5-point and maybe a 3-point, a 2-point and a 1-point, so that we can actually spread the wealth and work on it, because one 13 points, a 34-point story, that can be a sprint buster right there. We don't want to be busting our sprints. All right, let's not do that. All right, so helping the team stay on track and avoid scope creep. I tell you, Scrum Masters, they are super valuable, especially if you have like great Scrum Masters, to avoiding sprint disaster, to having the nuclear button pressed on your sprint. We do not want that to happen. All right, so that gets us to our conclusion. We are about to wrap it up. So we spoke about what is sprint planning, the purpose of sprint planning, who participates in planning, the key activities that go on during planning, the results that you want to have from planning, the best practices, some challenges that we face, what's the role of a Scrum Master during planning as well as during the sprint, and then we're here at our conclusion. If you have any questions about the whole sprint planning, like one of the most important meetings in the Agile ceremonies, please leave me a comment and I'll be more than happy to answer it for you. Or you can call in on Tuesday nights where we have live Q&A, where you can call in, ask me a question, we can have a discussion and go back and forth so that I can help you to have a better understanding. Because guess what? If you're trying to be in tech, this will come up. Every team, even the DevOps team, have these processes in place, and it is essential that you get very, very well familiar with them. All right. So we're going to go back to full screen. And I did mention that I would love to show you our backlog so that you can see how what we use in the sprint planning, so you can have a better understanding of it. Right. So let me go and pull that up. All right. So as you can see here, this is a sprint that we're currently working on. It ended up getting extended because of different circumstances, but sprint 25, we have these 2 stories in the current sprint. And we have our sprint goal here, have the front end migrated to a microservice. And then the backlog, we have the upcoming stories for the sprint, not even for the sprint, but like upcoming stories that we're going to be pulling in for our next sprint. All right. So this is an example. This is through Jira. This is an example of our quotes application, our Poopy Pants quotes that we've been working on. And it has these 2 stories, and then we have the stories in the backlog that we'll be pulling into future sprints. All right. So just wanted to share that with you real quick. Hopefully you found that valuable. All right. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really, really appreciate you guys for rocking with me and for following along. Hopefully you found this very helpful and informative. And I would definitely recommend that even if you're not in tech, implement these practices into your own lives, because it is going to add so much value to you. All right. We're going to wrap it up. All right. So do me a favor on your way out. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know every time we go live and drop new content, as well as go to techcoachrap.dev. You can sign up for free today. You get access to exclusive content, sprint reviews that we do, our full Scrum night, which includes the sprint review, the sprint retrospective, which we spoke about, and the sprint planning that we do as well. And you can also get exclusive content like see me updating my resume. You can see how to use LinkedIn, Glassdoor, AI, so that you can revolutionize your job searching skills, as well as you have the opportunity to sign up to work with me one-on-one, where I will help you to help yourself so that you can kill it out there in the game. All right. That being said, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. This is Tech Coach Ralph with another episode of Software Explorations, Concepts and Overviews. We are out.